Support comes from BECU, a member-owned credit union putting people over profit, offering financial services and support to the community with access to local financial centers, over 30,000 ATMs, and online resources at becu.org. Federally insured by NCUA.
Hey, good morning. It's Paige Browning. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. I don't know about you, but I've been spending a lot of time outdoors this summer, and I'm noticing all of these interesting things about Seattle that I didn't notice before. Susanna Ryan figured this out years before me. She's behind the Seattle Walk Report, and she has a new book out about the quirky secrets hidden around the city. We'll get a history lesson with her on today's show. But first, let's get you caught up. More than 1,000 Afghan people will be making their way to Western Washington in the coming months. The Everett Herald reports that 1,200 Afghan people will resettle in Snohomish County alone, and the county's elected officials are welcoming them with open arms. Snohomish executive Dave Summers calls it a moral obligation. They'll join an already growing community. Washington has welcomed about 8% of the total arrivals from Afghanistan in the past few years. That's according to the State Office of Refugee and Immigrant Assistance. If you're looking to get out of town in the next few months, please don't go to Hawaii. That's basically the exact message from Hawaii Governor David Ige, who has stopped short of issuing a travel mandate, but did put new limits on restaurants and car rentals. Ige said it's just too dangerous with the Delta variant spreading to welcome tourists right now. And let the games begin again. About a dozen Washingtonians are set to compete in the Paralympic Games, including track star Chelsea McClammer, who helped Team USA sweep the podium in the 1,500-meter and 5,000-meter in Rio. Lake Stevens' Katie Holloway is back to defend her gold medal in sitting volleyball, and Walla Walla's David Wagner will go for a 9th Paralympic medal in sitting tennis. We've all spent a lot of time closer to home in the last year, slowing down and just walking in our own neighborhoods. This slower pace lets you see more of your surroundings and notice details that you normally wouldn't see speeding by in a car or a bus. Susanna Ryan is a City of Seattle librarian who's walked countless miles around town. Armed with a notebook and her phone, she captures little pieces of Seattle history. Her second book, Secret Seattle, an illustrated guide to the city's offbeat and overlooked history, came out this month. And she's here to tell us more about her local discoveries. Hey, Susanna, thanks for being here.
Hi, Paige. Thanks for having me.
How did you launch into all of this walking and documenting?
Well, it all kind of started in 2017. I've never been much of a walker before, quite the opposite, actually. Never that good at gym class. I had exercise-induced asthma, and I just never really thought that any sort of fitness was the life for me. And one day in 2017, something just kind of compelled me to leave my apartment one day without a destination or any time restraints at all. And I think that really just suddenly opened up the world for me. Within minutes, I felt like I was seeing things that I had never seen before, noticing stuff. I found a little park that I had never seen before. And so after a while, all these walks started to kind of blend together in my head. So I got the idea to try to document it somehow. And the most kind of reasonable thing for me seemed to be to combine drawing with walking, which is something that I've always liked to do, but never really had a good channel for. And then after making the first one, even though I just kind of wanted to keep it to myself, I decided to put it out there on Instagram for other people to find. So I called it Seattle Walk Report. And I was expecting only my mom and maybe a couple coworkers to follow along. But as I kept walking and kept making comics about it, it just kind of grew from there. And then I got the opportunity to make a book, which came out in 2019 called Seattle Walk Report. And then one thing led to another. And here I am with the second book. So it just kind of all magically kicked off from that first step I took out my front door.
Wow. A very organic process.
Yeah, definitely.
You just deciding to put your 2 feet on the ground. And your first book, the Seattle Walk Report, was a big success. What do you think readers find so appealing about these little slices of history and the city that you found?
I think it's part of it's a big part of all of our lives in the city, these little details of neighborhoods, but they're not something that people talk about very often. So it seems like everybody who lives in a certain neighborhood may all know if you live on Capitol Hill, you probably know some sign that's on Broadway. You've seen it a million times, whether or not you've taken the time to slow down and notice it. And it's sort of what makes up the character of a neighborhood. And so I think part of the appeal might just be that someone's finally kind of documenting these different little more mundane things that make up everybody's kind of neighborhood experience.
For Secret Seattle, the book that just came out, what type of things did you decide to focus on?
I really wanted to look at the kind of more overlooked pieces of infrastructure and sidewalks and little overlooked details of neighborhoods to try to find some of the local stories behind them. So things like fire hydrants or utility poles or just different things like that, lampposts, and kind of digging down and figuring out who the people were behind this and what kind of stories there are to tell.
That's what's so fun about your book, too, is that you are really bringing to life on the page these sort of little known pieces or maybe forgotten pieces of Seattle history. Can you tell us more about the history of the coal chutes?
Sure, yeah. So, gosh, where do I begin? It's so exciting to talk about coal chutes. So basically what I found out is that this guy, T.F. Clark, he came to Seattle sometime before the Great Seattle Fire of 1889. And at the time, whether you arrived in Seattle before or after the fire was something of how sometimes people are a little bit judgy if you only came to Seattle in the last 10 years or whatever, It was that kind of thing. It was like, oh, you only came here after the fire. I see. So he was a true original to whatever extent. And so he was a sheet metal worker. And at the time, coal was the predominant, heating and electrical. People needed coal. And so this door, he felt in his patent application, was a beautiful upgrade to the coal chute technology available at the time. And it actually went on to be pretty big within Seattle among new buildings, putting in this particular coal chute. And I just thought it was cool to find that little local connection.
Yeah, I saw in the book, there's architecture, there's the Phabok Soup Shop, there's Orient Express. And can you tell me about these unusual cluster lights that you found?
Sure, yeah. So actually, they're throughout downtown and Pioneer Square. And if you've been downtown, even if it's been a while, if you've been down there any time within the last 100 years, you've probably seen these lights. They're these 3 bulbed post lights. And they're throughout downtown. And what I found out is that they were actually part of an attempt in the early 1900s to put Seattle on the map as the best lighted city in the United States. There was this big, all these like new modern electricity options were now becoming available. And Seattle decided that ahead of its first World's Fair, the 1909 Alaska and Yukon Pacific Exposition, that they wanted to install these cluster lights to really dazzle visitors to the city. So they ended up installing hundreds of them. They started on 3rd Avenue and then went to 2nd and 1st. And it was a frenzy like you wouldn't believe to get more cluster lights. The second they turned on the 3rd Avenue lights, everybody was like, we got to get in on these cluster lights. And it actually really did work. We had all these visitors to the city. The Atlanta mayor came to visit and said that Seattle has a lot of things we want down in Atlanta, and cluster lights is one. So it really did work. And it's so cool to see. Not all of the posts that you'll see downtown are original, but that same design has carried through for over 100 years. These little kind of marvels in metal down there.
Oh my gosh. The best lit city. Something else that you have documented a lot of are these sidewalk stamps. Mm-hmm. What's the deal with these?
So what they are is that when Seattle was first getting cement sidewalks in the early 1900s, it was common for the contractor selected for the job to stamp their contractor name into the wet cement, kind of as a calling card. So if someone's walking along and they're like, wow, who paved this sidewalk? I want to get them. They would know who to call.
Nice and smooth.
Yeah, exactly. And it was also just kind of to celebrate a sidewalk well paved. So throughout the city today, you can actually find a lot of these stamped sidewalks, which means that the sidewalk, most of the ones I've researched are from about 1900 to 1910, with the oldest one I found being one from 1901, making it 120 years old. So lots of Seattleites' footsteps over that patch of sidewalk over all these years. But it's really fun to look out in different neighborhoods and try to find these old sidewalk stamps with different contractors.
Yeah, now I'll be thinking of you anytime I see some little curiosity or oddity on my walks. What have your discoveries told you about the character of Seattle, who this city is?
You know, I think I kind of see Seattle as a patchwork quilt that everybody's contributed to in some ways, especially on the street level. Like just yesterday, I was walking along Madison Street and I saw a brand new fire hydrant installed on a sidewalk that still had a sidewalk stamp on it. And so it was cool to see, wow, here's this little piece of 2021 Seattle next to this little piece of 1905 Seattle. And, you know, in 50 years, this fire hydrant will be the old fire hydrant and they'll be installing a, you know, who knows what, you know, and all these things kind of coexist together in this little patchwork across the city. You don't need to go far in the city to kind of see what is sort of a little magical museum of Seattle history, in the infrastructure and the utility poles and everything else. So, and, you know, I'm just one person who, is a huge nerd and is super passionate about this stuff. And I decided, you know, I was able to find all this information. So maybe you could too. And we could all just kind of become little, walk reporters for our own block and kind of see what we see and try to learn a little bit more about it.
That magical history is documented in Susanna Ryan's new book, Secret Seattle, an illustrated guide to the city's offbeat and overlooked history. And that came out this month. Susanna, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Paige. So nice to talk to you.
Thanks for listening today. And if you haven't yet, find us on Instagram. We're at SeattleNowPod. Jenny Cecil Moore produced today's show. Our production team is Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, Diana Opong, Clare McGrane, Matt Martin, and Jason Pagano. Thanks to our colleague Hans T. White for helping with audio engineering today. Matt Jorgensen does our theme music. I'm Paige Browning. See you tomorrow.